Hello there and welcome to Community Life. Here we talk with the community experts about their life journeys and learn from each other. And today we have a conversation with Chris Catania, a live music fan, endurance runner, community and collaboration leader with 20 plus years of experience, and passionate explorer of life. So, hello, Chris.
Hey Yuri, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Oh, cool. I'm super happy to meet you. And tell me, did anyone ever tell you that Woody Harrelson is a bad guy in the Venom 2 movie has something in common with you?
Yes. When I was younger, I used to have a shaved head, and I would be waiting tables because I used to be a waiter at a restaurant in Chicago, and I would often get people looking at me, and then I was wondering why, and then someone said, "Oh, you look like Woody Harrelson." And I said, "Oh yeah." I went home that night and I looked in the mirror and I was like, I did my best, Natural Born Killers or, White Man Can't Jump lines, and I said, they're right. I guess so. So I always mention that, and people go, yeah, sure, yeah.
Nice. Did they propose you to go to Hollywood or something like that? No?
Well, funny story. My nickname growing up as a young child was Hollywood. So I always enjoyed putting on a show. Maybe a little attention grabbing, but I'm a middle child, so maybe that's what I just had to do. But my nickname growing up was Hollywood because I enjoyed performing and entertaining people. So maybe that's another adventure I should go on.
Did you choose this nickname or somebody gave it to you?
Uh, Man, I think someone gave it to me. Yeah, it's a Hate Hollywood. Like it was like, you know, okay, stop putting on a show or keep entertaining us or something like that. I had a bunch of different little acts I used to do as a kid from what I was told. I have some pictures to prove that, I guess, too, to back that up, that people would remind me. But I think it was Hey Hollywood. That was kind of how it was how it was used. So yeah.
A long time ago, you wrote that you learned from your toddler playing. So, what did you recently learn from your children?
Yeah, so when I first became a parent, I really learned, just to, understand what they, what they are as as a person, how much they reflect, and just how to, the basic things like, being patient and, really being kind of mindful of myself, because I would see certain things in them, and then, I might get mad at them, and I'm like, oh, maybe I taught them that, or just different things about myself. I think that was one thing I did not understand. I did not really fully comprehend when I became a parent, is that I would learn from them, and they're beautiful little mirrors, of your, and sponges. They're mirrors and sponges, and then uh, when I had my first kid and second one, I really was able to glean a lot from them on, you know, the early stages of my community building career, and kind of learn how to, build that, and, build aspects of what I was learning into, the community strategy, or into how it interacted at work or life or things like that. So it was kind of this added bonus of being a parent. I didn't expect that, and I was like, oh, I'm learning tons of stuff here, from these little creatures that are testing me, um, you know, uh, making my heart full, breaking my heart, doing all the things in one, in one fell swoop. So yeah, they continue to do that as they, and so that will never stop. So, but I'm glad I learned that
Exactly.
early on.
From that little mirrors who are showing you everything about you. So,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's, always a good thing, but it's the truth. They do. They reflect back.
did you notice any difference while you are having your son and then your daughter? So, like, any difference in like, okay, this is my first children and this is my second children. Like, was it the same experience or something changed in your mind?
Well, yeah. There's a lot of things that changed. I think I took very well. I took so many pictures of my son when he was first born. I think my Instagram account proves that. And my phone too, and all the photos that Google has saved in my cloud storage. And then when I had my second child, I took a lot less. of that. For I don't know, I still think about that. Like, why did I do that? I think there were certain thoughts I had about privacy, that I really started to think about. You know, would they want all of their pictures like that on the internet? Do they like? I just had a bunch of different thoughts between the first child and the second child, and I think that was there influencing that, and trying to be more present too. I think with my second child. But I think it's you're excited when you have your first child and you want to take pictures and you want to share that. So I think there's a balance of like not being too hard on myself, but also, that I was excited. And when you're excited, we have this thing called Instagram in our phones, and we want to share, right? We're excited about that. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but then I started to think, when these kids grow up and, when they get to be my age or younger, somewhere in there, they have an ability to think and look back. I'm like, well, would they want their experience as a 5-year-old, 2-year-old, or whatever on the internet? Because if my experiences and what I did when I was 2, 5, 8, 9, or whatever is on the internet and searchable, wow, like it just blew my mind, because I was like, okay, wow. I was like, so I have lots of different thoughts about that, kind of how that experience is. But there was a difference between the first child and second child. I think I took like 50% less pictures. And I think about that, and I'm, if my second child, wants to ask like, oh, why does he
Where
have
is
more
my
pictures
Instagram
than me?
photos,
Did you love
Daddy?
me
Where is my
half less?
yeah?
All that. You took so much more. I'm like, no, here's why. Here's that. But I believe I was equally present for both of them. It was just I had a definite change in perspective on the use of my phone and pictures, and what I wanted to share, and what pictures I wanted to take. And I think that was one thing. And then just, being a little more confident and a little bit more, just understanding of them as a person. There's this really funny commercial. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it shows the parents are when their first child is born, they're really protective and making sure everything's like super clean, and then they have the second kid come out, and they're like changing right on the floor and in the middle of dirt and oil and all this kind of stuff. They really don't care. And I laugh every time I see that, because that's so true, because you're so protective of your first child. And you're like, oh, I got to protect this thing from the outside world and anything. I got to clean I got to make sure all these different things. And then when it's time to change the diaper of the second child, you're just like, boom, I'm just going to put it down and I don't really care. So there's that shift, that happens. And I definitely had that too. So I love that. I love that commercial. Very true.
Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your parents. Who are they?
Yeah, my parents, they are came from, well, they're my dad's side. The family going back came from Catania, Sicily, and my grandfather, great grandfather, were coming over from Catania, Sicily, and started a business in New York, and eventually came to Chicago. That's where I'm originally from. And then there was a trucking business that was started. And then my parents, I think this is the correct story, that they met because they lived on the same street, and there was a connection between babysitters, I believe. And my dad had met my mom through the local neighborhood families knew each other, and then that's kind of how that they met, and then yeah, started dating, and the rest is history. Yeah, my mom is still alive. My dad passed away in 2010. And then my mom has remarried and all that kind of stuff. So but they're definitely influential. Had a lot of experiences with my dad and my mom growing up. So it was pretty interesting growing up with them.
And you told they met with our baby sisters. They were babysitting, or babysitters connected them?
Babysitters connected them. I believe that's how they met. Yeah, because my mom comes from a big family of 12, and they lived near the same street. I believe. I think that's how they met. I should know that better, but I think that's essentially how they met.
And how does it feel for you to have such a big family? So your mom's comes of family of 12. So you have a lot of aunts and uncles. You must be a
Mm.
lucky child.
Yeah, I'm one of the older grandchildren. Of that, I think there's like 32, or at least 32 grandchildren. I'm one of the top five oldest um, of that. So it's interesting. It's you get to know a lot of them, but then you don't really get to know a lot of them because there's so many. So I have a lot of memories of going up to Wisconsin for Christmas, and I never remember seeing the carpet in the floor in the room. I just remember this big Christmas tree and just people everywhere. It was like this massive litter of aunts, uncles, everybody, Christmas paper, wrapping. Like I just never remember the floor. I maybe remember a little bit of the shag carpet kind of poking through, but there's just so many people, and you get to know certain cousins and hang out with them, but then you don't have time to hang out with everybody. So that's kind of what I remember, and I hung out with a lot of the older cousins because we grew up together with that. And there's so many experiences too. I did an experiment, or I did a project one time where I interviewed most of my uncles and aunts and my grandparents because I wanted to get to know them. Much in the same way you're doing this, I didn't know who they were, and I had started to do that with my parents. I didn't know who they were. My background is in media studies and journalism, so I've always had an interest in wanting to get to know people, question them, much like what you're doing with this podcast, which is why I was excited to come on board and be a guest, because I was like, oh, I think Yuri and I are cut from the same cloth, of the same mind, because I did that same thing with my parents. I didn't know who they were as people.
Yeah.
I knew who they were as my mom and my dad, but I didn't know who they were. So I took it upon myself to interview them in my it was my early 20s, mid 20s or so, and because I wanted to get to know who they were as a people, as a person, their successes, their failures. Because for some reason at that age, I realized that there were certain things that I wanted to do and certain things that I didn't want to do. Failures, successes, things like that. I wanted to kind of learn from all that. So I started with my parents and got to know them, and then I was like, well, I don't know my aunts and uncles, and no one was cataloging all of their experiences, because I had learned a little bit about my grandfather, my mom's father, and I was like, well, he's a really great man, and I knew him as a grandfather, but he was a business owner and an entrepreneur. And I was like, oh, that's amazing, and we have this lineage of, musicians, entrepreneurs, things like that. So I just took it upon myself to start interviewing different family members, and I'm glad I did, because my grandfather and my grandma both passed away a few years ago, and we've had some other deaths in the family, some aunts and uncles and things like that. So we have those videos that I did. It's not a finished project. I still needed to, I still have a lot to do and to do that, but I had a chance to get to know them. And that led me, because I heard all these things about, them being musicians, entrepreneurs, and I just wanted to learn about them. And I wanted to be able to have something like an archive that people could do that. So I've maybe 3/4, halfway through or so of all of them, and trying to put that together. But that was a really good thing that I did, and both for myself, and I've gotten some really good comments back about people wanting to see those videos and stuff like that. So it was, and I learned a lot about myself too. I was like, I didn't know Grandpa did that. I didn't know Grandma was like that, or my uncle was interested in that. I started to see things in myself, different things. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can carry on this legacy, or maybe I could do this, or maybe that's why I like this, so it was a great journey.
Was there something you started doing after that and stopped doing?
Oh, like behavior wise?
Yeah.
I started to kind of focus a little bit more on who I was, or who I am, and be like, well, this is why I like this, so I started to focus on some of my talents, because I didn't know why I was good or why I was passionate about certain thing. I'm like, oh well, this is this is that. So I started to work on myself more, and I learned how really sharp and well put together my grandfather was financially, and that wasn't something that I really understood a whole lot. Wasn't necessarily taught that as as a child or growing up, directly from my family, my parents. So I learned from that, and I was like, well, I want to implement these same things that he was doing financially, as far as taking care of your finances, building wealth, starting a business, like just all these different things. He was, and he wasn't a very outspoken person necessarily. You really had to ask him. So when I did that, I started to change and cut out certain things, focus on certain things, and really start to understand like what I needed to do and what I didn't need to do. Like I changed how I spent my money. I changed how I spent my time. I made certain decisions. I changed my thought process. So it was a pretty big thing.
Do you have one rule that you can share that you made for yourself after your project?
I think one rule is to listen and to value people's experiences, and that to listen to the older generation, because I always believe there's all this wisdom and knowledge locked up in the, whether it's the elderly, whether it's the wisdom. We have this stigma, when people have gray hair, or the when you get above a certain age, ageism. Like I get kind of frustrated at that, because it's like, oh, youth, or there's so much knowledge locked up. So when I sat down and talked with my grandfather, my grandma, or anybody that was older or whatever, right? I was, whatever we think that is. I was like, well, I need to stop thinking like that. And there's all this wisdom. So anytime I'm in the room with somebody who's older than me, or maybe has gray hair, or whatever, all those things we associate, right? Like with that, I always want to sit down and ask them questions, or and change that. So I don't. And as I've gotten older, that's been a shift for me, because I realize that I'm older now, and I need to give back, and I need to be able to make myself available or be intentional about mentoring, because that's a whole other thing. Like just the lack of mentoring that happens in our culture, society, and it really. I'm glad I had a chance to interview my grandfather and my parent, and get to know my parents, who they were, because there was a lot of wisdom that they shared that otherwise doesn't get passed down. So I prioritize that, and I try to make time, make effort to either glean that from them, or respect who they are as a person, individually, or what they've contributed, as throughout their life, because everybody's got amazing stories. I mean, I love hearing what people have experienced, and anybody who writes a book or has a podcast or whatever, they're talking about like what they've learned, especially someone that's older, that's been through some things, some tough things, failures, successes, things like that. So I try not to fall victim to the ageism, and not and this is the thing too, like with older generations, they tend to, our culture tends to forget about the elderly, the old, or again, I don't know if the best way to say that, but in nursing homes, right? Or you don't call them and they're sitting at their home by themselves, or just, the community sense of community seems to go down when you get older. People don't reach out, or you get forgotten, or things like that. So anything that I can do to not have that happen, that's what I learned. I was like, well, I'm gonna try and talk with as many old people as I can, because there's tons of knowledge there, and they don't always share it, because they don't feel that it's valuable, but I always feel it is, and who they are as a person is valuable. So that's one thing.
Yeah, and you told about mentoring. So are you a mentor yourself?
Yeah, I've mentored people within community industry. I've made myself available through my local church, through Boy Scouts as well. I mentor kind of in individually, or I should say informally, with different groups. And that's not necessarily a new, or it it didn't always happen, is what I'm trying to say. Because what I was just telling you, that was a mind shift with me. I think when I got to a certain age, when I got over 40, I was like, well, wow, I know things. Like, I've been through things. And when you go through things, you don't realize you're going through things. And then when you have hindsight and you're like, yeah, I navigated some pretty hairy things at a younger age. Or you don't see yourself as um, capable or qualified, I guess, to be a mentor. But for me, that switch flipped a few years ago, and I'm like, Chris, it's time to give back. Like, you have to mentor. So I started taking extra, intentional steps to do that, and I try to do more, because it's easy to slip into not giving back, or thinking that you don't have something that anybody else can benefit from. It's something weird that happens in our brains. I don't know what it is, but I hate that, and I battle against that all the time, where it's like, you do know stuff, Chris. You have knowledge to share. You're not being egocentric. Somebody out there can gain benefit from what you have learned in your experience. And I think about my grandfather. I think about how I had to ask him. Sometimes you have to, so it's this cycle, it's this relationship between that mindset of, that you have been to a certain point. I don't think you have to be a certain age to mentor either. I mean, I try to talk about that with my kids, and say, hey, when you get to a certain age, you can, you can help somebody that's younger than you, and it happens in reverse, right? Like the reverse mentoring. Like, I've had people that are older than me. I sit down and talk with them. I think it's a give and take, a give and take relationship with that. I've had people who have mentored me say, like, yeah, I've been influenced by you, Chris. So it goes both ways.
What kind of mentor are you?
Kind of mentor am I? I don't know. I guess I like to think about things and really listen to what that person is saying, and really try to figure out, like, what do I need to share with them? What I love to listen, like, that's, and really find out, like, what the purpose is, and or what that person might need. I just don't want to spew out things that aren't helpful. So I'm very aware. I put a lot of stock in emotional intelligence, and being able to relate with people. I love being around people, but I'm also an introvert. But I love to be. I'm an introverted extrovert, I guess. I don't know, but I thrive on being with people. But then I need to recharge my battery at certain times. But I get charged up by being around people, by giving back. But that's the kind of mentor I am. I think I've never really thought about that, but I think it's just being able to listen, getting to know that person, and just seeing what they need. What do they need to be reaffirmed? Do they need a piece of experience? What sort of mentoring do they need? And then hopefully I can provide that to them.
Yeah. Tell me about your Life Fix podcast. How did you decide to start it, and what is the story behind?
Yeah, Life Fix, man. That started way back when I mentioned I had a journalism background. So when I got out of college, I started looking for jobs, and then this thing called the internet happened, and then I had to go, like, oh, all the newspapers that I thought I was going to write for, started to shrink, and then this thing called the internet started to grow, and there was blogging, and then it was shortly after that there was social media and all these different things. So I started to write, doing freelance, local papers, online websites, and then I'm a huge music fan. I love music, all types of music. So I started writing for music magazines, and then I started making myself available to cover the Chicago live music scene. So I started doing music reviews, and then I brought my wife along to that because she's a counselor, a therapist, but she's also a photographer. So while we were kind of doing our day jobs because we had, you got to pay bills when you're a little bit younger out of college, right? But so we would go to shows at night, and we would cover shows, and I would write album reviews, concert reviews. And then I had this one moment when I was at a concert because I had been doing it for a while, like for a few years, and I was like, well, I don't want to write about what's happening on stage as much. I looked around at everybody who was around me in the crowd, and I was like, I'm having an amazing experience at this show. Like, I'm not the same that I was when I came to the show. I'm being changed right now, and I'm most likely going to be changed after the show, right? So I'm like, I want to know who these people are around me, and how are they having that same experience. And I didn't see anything out on the internet at that point. It was all about what's happening on stage, the artist, and it was great. Like, I love reading about the artist and the music, and doing that. I really enjoy that. But I wanted to get to know the fans. I wanted to get to know them, who they are, what makes them. I love psychology. I love everything that kind of, the connection between the mind, the body, and the heart, and what makes us move and do things and feel things and all that kind of stuff. And so I took music, I took my love for storytelling, and then I took my love for writing and putting that together, and the psychology and sociology, all kind of stuff, the study of humans and situations. I've always been just a really student of that, right? And then I was like, well, I'm going to start doing experiments on myself, because I love biohacking and doing different things, and I was really into that earlier when I in my late 20s, early 30s, and there wasn't any way, because this is pre-Facebook, this is pre-Twitter, and those tools hadn't come out yet. But when I was at a show, I would do experiments. Like, I blindfolded myself at a Radiohead show. I went to a St. Vincent concert, and I did certain sensual experiments and kind of testing the senses. I would just go to shows with a different perspective. So I started doing experiments on myself, and I would go to my blog and I would write about that. And I say, well, how did that change me? I would have experience in myself. When my father was getting sick and before he died, I intertwined those into my reviews, my concert reviews. So I was like, we don't just go to shows as this blank slate of a person. We go to shows with things, right? With thoughts, emotions, and that concert either takes us deeper, reflects it back at us, and all these kind of things. So I was incorporating all that little by little into my music, or into my music writing. And that's when I was like, well, I wanted to do that. And then Twitter came out, and I was able to see into other people's minds and hearts, because they were starting to tweet about it. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I can do that. So I started to interview people, and then podcasts came out, and I was like, we need to interview them. So I would bring my microphone and everything to the show, and I would interview people. And then my wife, she has a clinical psychology background. She's a practicing counselor and therapist, psychotherapist. So I was like, we could have a really cool show. I could interview fans, and she's a music fan too. She loves the Grateful Dead and lots of other fans, or other music. And we still hadn't seen anything like this. There was still just a focus on artists, on the music. There wasn't any like fans. I mean, there were fan forums, right? But there wasn't anybody like celebrating and experimenting, exploring the concert fan experience. So that Live Fix was the first time that I came back or built a community, and it was through the content that I was sharing. And then we had the podcast, and we brought people on. We started exploring different topics and doing that. And then, that was the first community that I had built. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was just following, like you, following your curiosity. And I was like, oh, this is great. So it allowed me to, experiment with different social media tools, community building, content, a little bit of business strategy, because I had to figure out how to grow it, and sponsors, all that kind of stuff. So, and then it became this great template for experimentation and job opportunities, all that kind of stuff. And I still love to do it today because we still have the show. We put a little pause on it when we had our first child 8 years ago, but we recently brought it back. But it was a big big moment, and I love doing it. Huge part.
How do you choose who to interview?
Yeah, we follow curiosity. We look at certain themes. If we want to talk about anything from how does alcohol or going to a show sober impact a concert, right? Can alcohol or drugs make a good show bad or a bad show good? Something like that. But the stories of the people, we get responses from people that will see a picture of my wife took of Bon Iver, the artist. He had a tattoo on the back of his neck. My wife was backstage at a show and took that picture, put it on Pinterest, and somebody reached out to us about a tattoo that they got because they were at a show. So that led to having Isabel was her name. One of my favorite stories that we've interviewed. They reached out to us, and my wife and I will often say, "Oh, we got to get this person on the show." We have to wow, I can't believe this, or we want to talk to this person about their mosh pit, experience, or so we have different themes, different things that, whatever's not being talked about, or if there's something taboo, if there's something that needs to be talked about or explored, that's kind of our goal. And then we've learned really what people enjoy listening, and it's the stories. We had recently this lady, she went to the very first Beatles concert in the United States in 1964. And she wrote a book. We came across the book on a vacation one time, and we just brought her on the show. And it turned into this beautiful conversation about her experiences, and she's very articulate. And it was a great experience. So that's kind of how we pick guests. If we kind of keep our eyes out, we look at all types of genres, rock, hip hop, funk, jazz, blues, all the different eras. We try to encompass it all. But that's it's topic based, theme based. If there's something strange going on, we'll probably talk about something related to this whole Taylor Swift concert Ticketmaster thing. If there's something that's like we got to get a Swiftie, concert, a Taylor Swift fan on the show. We've talked about that. So those things drive us to get guests.
Did you have any Linkin Park or Eminem's fans on the show?
Any Linkin Park, you said?
Yeah, Linkin Park or Eminem's fans.
Oh, not we have somebody had mentioned Eminem. Not specifically, no. We do have some folks we're going to reach out to soon that are like rap rock. Like we're thinking of doing a show about the Woodstock anniversary, the Woodstock '99, and kind of what happened there. But not specifically, no. But I'm a big Eminem fan.
What is your favorite Eminem song?
Oh man, it's a toss up. I love the early stuff, the Slim Shady.
Yeah.
But I definitely have 8 Mile. When that movie came out, I think that changed a lot for a lot of people. Created a whole community of people that love music and hip hop, and I can recite all the lyrics. I won't now, but yeah, 8 Mile, Lose Yourself. But I think he was at his best, when he was doing his Slim Shady, the Eminem show. I think it's called I'm Back. That's the eighth track on the Eminem show. So that's
it's classics.
Yes, yeah. I know we've often talked about that on the podcast about or just in music in general. The artists, the connection between them using drugs and alcohol and how that impacts art. And a live show? Do they make better art when they're sober or when they're not? There's and Eminem is always someone that I look at and go, he was really good, like when he was doing the Slim Shady stuff and just the word that he was doing. But I know he was using a lot during those times, and that became part of his art. And I just haven't been a fan of his latest stuff as much as the older stuff. So I often wonder, I'm like, is there something in our brains that makes us, more creative when we're taking drugs or whatever? But then I know those can be really destructive. Obviously, they can kill people and they can kill creativity in our brains. So it's this weird, like, dichotomy balance that we actually talked about that in the podcast about, when an artist is suffering from alcohol addiction or drug addiction,
Mhm.
and they're performing, they might play a really good show because they have so much anxieties, and that they use the drugs and alcohol to, like, numb and calm their anxieties, and they put on a great show. So we had this really crazy conversation about, we benefit as fans from using
Yeah,
that, because I'm like, that was a great show. I'm like, but
yeah,
so yeah, it's a really kind of interesting thing to explore. But Eminem was one of the people that we talked about on that, and that's thoughts that I've had about that.
did you experiment with drugs yourself?
No, nope, no, I've never. Well, I can say a little bit alcohol, but never drugs. No, I've never. It's. I've seen what it can do. How it can ruin someone's life and cause pain. So I don't. I understand it. I understand why people would want to do that. And there's the recreational piece of it, and then there's the abuse piece. So I've seen enough of the abuse to know that it's not something I'm interested in. And I always try to see if I can get to that state you know without any substances. I have other ways of getting
Yeah,
high, or getting to an altered state, or different senses and things like that. So, but no.
getting high on life, I would say.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's lots of ways you can do it without taking drugs. Yeah, I mean, it's that's was the ultra running is certainly one that comes in handy, to kind of get to those thoughts and feelings or visions in your mind, or all that kind of stuff. I've had a lot of experiences doing that while running.
Do you still run?
I do. Yeah. I love running, mountain running. Getting out to the wilderness, and being alone in nature, or being with other people. In community out there, and just being connected to the outdoors, myself and others. Like, that's just a really strong connection with that. So yeah, running helps me to work through thoughts, realize things about myself, and see what I can do or what I can't do, what I'm afraid of or what I need to do. I have this idea of when you're running, you're either running to something or you're running away from something. And you could be so, like, you could be addicted to anything, right? It could be drugs, it could be television, it could be Netflix, it could be running, it could be working out. Like, you kind of pick your thing, right? And I think whatever that is, you're running from something potentially that you don't want to deal with, some pain or something with that. So I've taken that thought upon myself, and tried to make sure that I just have balance with what I'm doing. But I've run ultra races. I don't win any of them. Like, I don't do it to win. There's people that are much faster than me, and I love them. They're awesome. But I'm out there for the experience, to be out there for 7-8 hours, and just start to drill down in my mind, my body, my soul, and what I need to learn. I need to get a message, or I need to clarify things, and break some things down, or peel some layers away. Running for long periods of time is a great way to do that. The monks did that, right? I mean, I don't know if you're heard of the Tibetan monks that would run 26 miles continuously, just so they could get in a meditative state. Love that concept. I've never done that, but I've run miles and miles where I've gotten to that state. And I go, okay, this is good. But then you got to make sure you write it down. That's the big thing, because I've had great ideas. I've been the recipient of revelations, right? But I didn't always write it down. And then there's something happens when you stop running and you're not in that state of flow, and you come back to your car and you're like, that was amazing, and you forget.
Yeah.
You forget what you learned, right? So I got in the habit of creating, breaks or audio. I record, so I carry something with me on my phone or whatever, so I can, like, oh yeah, I need to do that, or need to do this, and then and write about it. I heard what's his name, David Goggins, talking about that recently, about how he uses the running to understand things about himself, because it's really a quick way to get deeper fast, without having to go through a bunch of different things, or it's a great tool. So yeah, I run. and I do lots of different things, different athletics and different stuff. Athletics has always been a big part of my life too.
And what do you like the most about the trail time?
I think it's always a very spiritual time for me. There's a time where I can get out and I can be by myself, or I can be with other people, and I have different experiences. Whether I'm with people and we're sharing this experience, like a race or a group run, we're going out into the mountains, or maybe just a road run around the neighborhood. But it gets to another level when you're out in the mountains and you're out in the wilderness and you're running through things, and all you have on is your pack and your water, and you had to, you kind of had to prepare for this. It's like a little mini sabbatical, kind of, for your brain, your heart, and your soul. So you're out there kind of getting a little break and coming back. But I love what I learn, what I see. There's also a little sense of adventure. I don't think I'm an adrenaline junkie necessarily, but I enjoy being in situations that are going to push me a little bit. There was a great conversation that you're having with Carrie Melissa Jones about being uncomfortable for 10% with that. So I use trail running and a lot of my athletics to push, so I can be uncomfortable, because that for me has shown me to bring emotions up, or things that I'm not aware of, that I call it, breaking it down, or letting your there's different layers that kind of burn off of you, that your subconscious can come up. So I love experiencing that on the trail by myself, and understanding kind of what did I need to learn? What am I missing in my life that I didn't realize before? But then I got to make sure I got to write it down. I got to take action on it. What good is the revelation, or what good is the insight if you don't do something with it? So that's the challenge. And I've had many of those moments, but that's one thing I love. Getting back. There's the physiological part of it. There's the high, there's the endorphins, there's the dopamine release that's happening physiologically. And I've seen a lot of beautiful things. I been on top of mountains. I've been close to animals. That kind of oh, hi, Mr. Bobcat. How are you doing today? Don't eat me, or that kind of thing. So it just brings brings it to a new level. Makes you see your mortality, and how precious your life is. Just understanding that. I mean, that's the thing I love, is you can really go to some pretty deep levels within nature creation, and it's right here in my backyard. So appreciate to have that opportunity.
Yeah, and about conversation with animals. Some time ago, you made a Instagram post, and you told that you were talking to your bearded dragon Red, and he's super generous with advices. So what advice did Red give you back then?
Yeah, what did he say on that post? Yeah, the bearded dragon. Yeah, Red. He's our faithful pet, because we don't have any pets in the house that have hair, because we're all allergic to pets. Like I am and my son are. So we can only have a bearded dragon, unless we'll have runny noses and eyes and scratching and asthma. But Red is really good at being able to. I think I took that picture during during the pandemic, or
Yeah.
right before, or all the lockdown stuff happened. Because I had to ask Red. He'd been locked in a cage for a long time, so I think I was getting stir crazy at that point, and I was like, Red, what's your secret? You're in a cage more often than you're out of the cage. And I felt like I was in a cage like everybody during lockdown,
Yeah.
during COVID, of early days, right? It's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So I did what I usually do in the past, right? I interviewed him and I started talking to him. And he said, you just, and he's so still. He just stays there. He's so quiet, and in the way he's very stoic, and I admire that. I often just stare at him for a while, because he's very quiet and he hibernates and he does things on a cycle, and I think that's interesting. The animals are very habitual and instinctual. I think that's an interesting thing. So Red teaches me, how to be still, and he's very in tune with his surroundings. But I had to ask him because I was like, we've been locked up for a while here in our houses, and how are you doing it, Red? You know?
Have you read the book An Immense World?
I have not. No, what's that?
I I didn't read it too, but it's about animals, it's about plants, how can we learn from them and what can we learn from them.
Hmm.
So it's just on my reading list and I was wondering whether you read it. So
I have not.
maybe
No, I
maybe
will now.
one
Yeah.
day I will discuss this book too.
Yeah.
So some long time ago you did an experiment by not watching sports for a year.
Oh,
So
yes.
why did you decide to do it and how it influenced your life?
Yeah. Yeah. I've loved sports. Sports have been a part of my life like since the day I was born, I think. I grew up a Chicago Cubs fan. I wanted to play baseball for the Chicago Cubs, center fielder. It was one of my dreams. I've had a lot of really great experiences with my parents, with my dad specifically. At baseball games, football games. I learned a lot from sports. But there's this like dark side of that really, it became an escape, and I realized that was the case, and I've always had this like tug back and forth. Like I love watching sports because I learn a lot from it. It's not like I've never really lived vicariously through other athletes, like because if I'm watching something, like I want to be able to watch something and say like I could do that, or go out and do. I try to balance as much. Like if I'm gonna watch sports, I gotta be able to go play it, and that's kind of how I balance that. But there was this point in 2012, 2013, 2014 where I was getting really serious about this obsession, and I was like, is this healthy for me? Because then I started to do the math on how many hours I was watching sports, and I was still running, right? I was still running marathons and doing all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, all these sports, and then I was also wanting to do more writing and more express more creativity, but I was like, well, I think there's an imbalance of watching the sports and like, what am I doing? Am I avoiding things? Am I avoiding doing something on my creative side with sports, right? I have this thought about that sports teams really don't necessarily have any skin in the game when it comes to their fans. I've been a Cub fan my whole life, right? So that's part of the problem is that they didn't win a whole lot, right? It was always this level loser thing. So I just decided that I'm gonna do an experiment. I'm not gonna watch. And the other thing is, I realized that most of the conversations that I would have with people, with men specifically, were about sports, or I couldn't talk to somebody that I didn't know or getting to know them without doing sports. And I started to wonder, if I took sports out of my life, how would that impact my relationships? And How will that impact my creativity? What would I do with that extra hour? Because there was 782 hours in a year that I figured out that I was doing watching sports. A 3-hour game, baseball, football, pre-game, post-game, looking stuff up on the internet. Like it was like all these different things. So I just started to dive into those questions, and I decided, I think it was like December 2013. Okay, new year 2014, cutting it out, and I'm not going to watch any sports. I could play them, that's fine, but no, I'm not going to watch any live sports on my own. And if I'm with people, at a bar or at a restaurant, that counts too. Like you can't, nothing on the screens, and I can't talk about it either unless somebody asks me. And then I had to be like, well, what do I do there? So I decided to do that, and I did it for a year, and it was one of the funnest things, one of the hardest things, and beneficial things I did in my life, because I learned a lot, and it came through teaching me about the relationship between sports and my dad, and that that piece, because I remember I wanted to watch the Super Bowl in 2014, but I couldn't. So I'm like, what am I going to do, for that? It's like, ooh, these big guys, oh my gosh, right? And the whole thing became kind of silly too, or I realized how silly sports are, but then I realized how important they are. And like, there's some really amazing interactions socially that happen. I came across a lot of books. I think I mentioned that book, The Secret Life of Sport Fans, where they did this experiment about they actually did like saliva experiments on different sets of fans, like the things you feel when your team wins and when your team loses. Because I also realized before I did the thing was that I couldn't, or I would have a certain level of depression, or a certain level of not like real like clinical depression, right? But just like my mood, it really impacted my mood, and that impacted my relationship with my family, with my wife, kids. I was like, wow, just because the Cubs lose, like what, the Bears won't win, or I was like, wow, I'm really emotionally invested in this. It's like, that's crazy. So because I took all that out, it like I had to face all of those questions, so I did a bunch of journaling and things like that. And it just illuminated a lot about the relationship connection between sports and my family, my dad. It helped me understand how to use sports in the right way, like how to have enough of them, but not too much, kind of that middle ground. And I learned, I had these like conversations with people, because I did experiments during that time period too, because people were like, oh, you're not going to watch the World Cup? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, and then it became good conversations, like, with that. But then I did experiment within the experiment, and I faked the conversation. Like I had watched the hockey game the night before, and I was surprised because I inserted things that I had never watched, and nobody noticed. So I was like, what's up with that? So it just unpacked all these different questions, and it made me look at sports completely differently. And I'm still a sports fan today, and I still struggle with that. Just too much, not enough. How much money, how much time, do you spend on that? Is it vicarious? Is it not? So it's just, it really was a great thing. And I often wondered if every sports fan did that for a year, like what impact would that look like on, from a revenue perspective for the sports teams, because whether the sports teams win or lose, or whether the fans seem to be important to the sports teams, but then they don't. So it's lots of questions with that. But yeah, it was a good time. It was a weird year. It was good.
Have you ever trick or treated on the moon?
Trick or treated on the moon?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, tell me, how did you come up with the idea for those cosmic Halloween costumes you had with your wife?
Oh, trick or treat. Oh, I got you. Oh, yeah. So I was like, wow. What do? We we were just at a Halloween store, and we wanted to do some kind of joint pictures, costume together. I'm a big Ray Bradbury fan, and I've always loved his explorations into space. Martian Chronicles, Getting to Mars, all those kinds of things. I had experience when I was a kid too. I was in 1986 when the space shuttle Challenger exploded in the sky. I saw that firsthand. So I've always been interested in those experiences, and I think space has always been something to me. So I think why not you know why not wear a costume, and kids thought it was cool too, and it was good, a lot of fun. You should try it.
I will definitely do it. And Chris, I really wish to have the sky as the limit to our conversation, but time is the limit. So let's jump to the rapid fire questions.
All right.
So, going on the trail or listening to live music?
Oh, I would go with listening to live music.
Baseball or football?
Baseball.
What are your favorite color and song?
My favorite color is blue, and my favorite song, man, it's got to be. I have a playlist that I use to when I write. I think we were just talking about this earlier. I'll go with my favorite Beatles song. How's that? Hey Jude is one of my favorite songs. I can listen to that song over and over again.
Yeah. If you were a superhero, what superpower would you have?
Ooh. I think the ability to see the future.
Super hard question. Who do you learn from in the community world? Name just one person.
One person. Yeah, I would have to say it depends on like everybody has like their own superpower, what they're really good at, right? And depending on what I need or what I need to learn.
I've learned from a lot of community professionals over the years. One that always stands out is Bill Johnston from Structure 3C, and all the work that he's been doing over the years has been great, fantastic, insightful.
A little easier question. So, name two people whose community life journey you are happy to hear about.
Oh, that I haven't heard yet?
As who I should talk to?
Oh, you should talk to, I think,
John O'Bacon and Rachel Hopp. Both of them have been really influential, and I've always loved their work, and I'd love to learn more about their story. It'd be fantastic to hear more from them.
Is there one question that I definitely should have asked you but didn't?
I think you asked a lot of good stuff. The inspiration. I think looking at just what can we do? What do we learn the most about our lives, and how is that applied to to community? I think that's the big stuff. I think you kind of did that already, right? In that way. I think we all like that. That's the whole point of what you're doing. The great stuff you're doing is understanding the people, the stories, and how we apply that. I think that's always fascinating to me, because we all have different stories. All of us that are doing this community industry stuff, we all have different approaches, different perspectives, different life experiences that kind of make up this like gumbo meal of the lens we see it through, and the approach and the different ways we've been successful in that. So yeah, I don't know if that's a question, but that's my thought.
That's it's a great thought. And Chris, thank you very much for your time. And it's always interesting to me to talk to somebody who I've been following a lot but never had an opportunity to talk to. So it feels like I know you but not. But then I have this feeling that I kind of know you.
Oh,
So
good. Well, good.
yeah,
I hope
and
we get to know each other more. I like what you're doing. Yeah, it's great to be a part of it and the
I
work you're doing in your
I really
life. And
found a lot of similarities between our mindset about curiosity and all the stuff. So thank you very
yeah,
much for sharing your experience, for sharing your life journey, and for sure a lot of wisdom. So thank you very much. And as always, meet you in the community world. And I hope we have some time in conversation just to get to know each other.
thank you, Yuri. It's been a pleasure. It's lots of fun.